Hello, welcome
Hello.
to my first podcast or interview, or whatever you would like to call it. And welcome Ellen Kramer, the founder of the College of Practical Homeopathy UK, where I graduated from in 2014, really. That's 11 years ago. It's a huge pleasure to speak to you, Ellen, one and only Ellen Kramer. Hello.
Hi, Casper. It's lovely to catch up with you. I know we're all busy running our lives and time just slips by very, very quickly. And I'm very honored that you want to talk to me about a subject I love talking about, and I'm all yours. You can ask me any question you like.
Thank you for finding time to speak to me. It's always a huge pleasure, and it's always very refreshing experience for me when I drift away into all my thoughts and anxieties around homeopathy. Now and then having that chat with you kind of anchors me to where I come from with my thinking, which is great. And I think it's what's very interesting is that we meet again. Last time we met, it was around full moon. I don't know. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened. It's an interesting synchronicity, I believe. Uh,
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk to you about your practical approach to homeopathy because you consider yourself a practical homeopath. You're a founder of the Practical College of Homeopathy, where I was extremely lucky to learn homeopathy from yourself and from other teachers. And the interesting thing was that I wasn't planning to study there. It just happened by accident. I was 2 months late. I joined in November, and I don't think at that time I was aware of how lucky I was to end up there because that was I was the last year where we actually met face to face and had all our classes face to face, and it was a fantastic experience, and I believe it still is for other students to start to learn from you. I wanted to uh, talk to you about your approach to homeopathy. So the first question I've got is, what is homeopathy to you?
Well, homeopathy to me is stimulating the body to do its healing. Although we say like cures like in homeopathy, for me, what I've learned over the years, it's like trauma cured by like trauma. So I found that the remedies work more effectively when you match the remedy to the cause of the person's symptoms. So for me, homeopathy is an amazing system of medicine that gently communicates to the body to find its own equilibrium and balance. It's not about remedies. To me, this is a people's business. And I love talking to people and finding out how they got ill in the first place. So I use homeopathy as a tool to analyze cases and support people to begin their own healing journey.
I remember from my days of studies in CBH where you used to call homeopathy a communication tool.
Absolutely.
Can you
It is a
expand a little
communication
bit
tool.
more on what do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people seem to think that the remedies work in the same way as, drugs. And I'll explain why. People will say that it's holistic, but they don't use it in a holistic method. What they're trying to do with the remedies is fix people's symptoms without understanding why those symptoms are there. So the body communicates through the symptoms. And once you understand the language of the body, it supports you to find the right way of prescribing for the patient. And that's the reason why we do different methodologies. So at CPH, we teach students 15 different ways of applying homeopathy, not just one way, but 15 different ways
I will
of
allow
applying homeopathy.
myself to show your book on, it's called Practical Guide to Methods of Homeopathic Prescribing, and that's the book you wrote in 2006. And it was one of the very important foundations and materials to study while I was learning at the CPH. And I do believe it's still valid. You still teach the same thing.
Absolutely. You see, when you're teaching from a place of truth, things don't change. The truth is eternal and it's immortal and it doesn't change. Once you find the healing principle, that doesn't change. So when you're looking at allopathy, everything you learn as a doctor is completely obsolete 30 years later because it's not based on truth.
Yeah.
When you're using different ways of applying homeopathy because you understand how to analyze the case and where you're working with the patient, the results are amazing. They
So how
really are.
How do you see, because a lot of places, and it's not a criticism, it's just an observation from my point of view. Um, a lot of new trends in homeopathy is all about discovering more and more remedies. And a lot of teaching that I see is very much remedy-based teaching, which is learning more about particular remedies, discovering more remedies, learning about more remedies, and we end up with thousands and thousands of new remedies. How do you see that? Because I'm not saying I'm doing it right. I still make my mistakes and stuff like that, but I really use a lot of very, very basic remedies, and I seem to get results from that. I'm not saying that the new remedies aren't important, but it seems to me like the expansion of materia medica means expansion of homeopathy to many people. How do you see that?
Well, I mean, to me, it's an interesting phenomenon, finding more and more remedies, which leads me back to what I said earlier. It's not the remedies that do the healing, it's the humans, it's the people. And when you're looking to prove more and more remedies, that's interesting. But ultimately, if you don't understand how to case analyze, your attention will be fixed on remedies.
Right.
Case analysis to me is the most important thing about homeopathy. You want to get back to the cause. So we have a little saying in CPH: cause, effects, and obstacles to cure.
I
I
remember
read
that.
Hahnemann's sixth organon and I brought it down to the first seven aphorisms in which he tells you find the cause, remove the obstacles, and the body will deal with the effects. The effects are the symptoms. And that's where people get caught because we've all been groomed to focus on symptoms,
Right.
not the causation of those symptoms. And there are many reasons why people get sick. And you need to know why people are producing those symptoms. And this is why at CPH we teach you observational skills and we use the five elements to guide you as well. So you're observing exactly what the patient's doing. So if a patient comes to you and says they wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, you know that that's to do with the lung energy. And you understand the lungs are paired to the large intestines and that this is about grief. So what you're seeing is the body's telling you it's still in grief. So if they're having their asthma attack at 3 a.m. in the morning, you can trace that back into their timeline to see where the grief is, what it is that they're in grief about. If they've got obstacles in the way, like they've been on steroids, then you need the tools to remove steroid toxicity from the body, and therefore you need to use a method called tautopathy. So there's different ways of applying homeopathy. The vast majority of people think that you fix the symptoms by finding the constitutional remedy for that patient. But hang on a sec, how do you know the constitution? You don't know what the person's inherited unless you take their timeline, unless you look at the family history and what their susceptibility is. So if you're trying to find arsenicum to fix somebody's asthma attack, it may fit all the symptoms. But if the cause is grief and they've been on steroids for 10 or 15 years, all you're going to do is get an aggravation because the body's going to tell you, I can't do what you're asking me to do. So this is why I say that homeopathy is an information technology. It's so advanced. It is speaking to the body on a quantum level to find its balance. And if you don't understand the language, you're not going to get the results that you want as a practitioner. And that, to me, that's what practical homeopathy is about. It's not a fixation on a single method, which a lot of people get stuck on one method and they think that that's going to help their patients. But in fact, there are many ways of supporting the body, and you need to know what they are. So the second thing we teach is the 3 T's: trauma, thought, and toxicity. You need to know where the cause of those symptoms are coming from. And a lot of people muddle up symptoms that are coming out of the drug toxicity that the patient's been taking. So there's all these variables that the modern homeopaths need to understand. We're not back in Hahnemann's time nearly 300 years ago. We're in the 21st century with 21st century toxicity
Very
and mental
different
health
world, isn't
issues.
it?
Yeah.
I remember you teaching arts in the college. You used to say quite often, remedies have no power. Do not give the power to the remedies. And that stuck in my mind, along with many other things. Um, because the way I feel, the way I'm observing other homeopaths, it's not a criticism at all. It's just an observation. The main focus is on the remedy, finding the remedy, and which is completely different to what you taught us. Because for you, the main focus and was the person and what's going on with them, rather than finding the remedy. So it's not using the analogy of the key, that there's only one key to fit only one lock, and if you don't find it, you're never going to get results. It's very different approach, isn't it? And it's, for me, it was very liberating.
It's funny that you should say that, Casper. I've just come back from the US, from Utah, and a lot of the students that we have there have done other trainings, and they all say the same thing. They feel not only liberated from the constraints of finding the perfect one remedy to fix all, they find that there's a freedom in understanding the cause of the patient's symptoms.
Mm.
And it's a universal law of cause and effects. Most people are drowning in the effects that their patients are presenting to them,
Yeah,
and then trying to find a remedy to fix those effects. To me, that's allopathy. It's not holistic. Even if you tell me that you're looking at the constitution of the patient, you've no idea what the constitution of the patient is, because the patient has no idea who they are. Most people have no idea who they are.
it's
But
the
when
layers
you,
and layers of stuff
yeah, yeah,
accumulating over the years, isn't it?
yeah, it's very different to constitutionally healthy people. And I know this because when I first graduated from CPH, so I'm just going to make it clear to your listeners that I trained at the College of Practical Homeopathy. I'm the founder of the course that you are learning now. It's not the course that I did, it's the course that I created because I found there were great gaps in my own learning. And it was the patients that taught me homeopathy because whatever I'd learned was not as effective. And I just went down the rabbit hole of trying to, find out what was going on with my patients. And then it clicked that if you focused on the cause of the symptoms and found the remedy that dealt with that causation, then you got the results, even though there were no symptoms related in that remedy picture. So I remember the students came, we had a student clinic, a case of lichen planus, and they took down all the symptoms. And I said to them, well, when did this start? And they said, well, it started 2 years after a severe car accident. So I said to them, well, let's give her arnica.
A
And the student
shock.
said, but arnica doesn't have any symptoms of this lady's, nor lichen planus. I said, give her arnica. And if I'm wrong, you can sack me from the clinic. But if I'm right, you'll have learned cause, effects, and obstacles to cure. So they gave the arnica, 12C twice daily. 1 month later, the patient came back, 90% of the lichen planus had gone. She was over the moon. She had tried years to try to clear it up. And they said to me, what happened? And I said, listen, when you have a massive trauma, the body gets stuck and it can't come out of that trauma. Give arnica and they come out of that trauma, the body will do the rest of the healing. All you have to do is support it. Now, my observation of lichen planus is that for most of the patients I've seen who've had that condition, there's always a trauma. And if you support the adrenals, just supporting the adrenals, the lichen planus begins to clear up.
So
So that was my learning with the students.
I remember because, you know, people often think of remedies like opium or aconite as a shock remedy. So I remember you mentioning when I was still a student about arnica as a shock remedy, which stuck in my head. And not long ago, a few weeks ago, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago, I was riding my bike in the forest and enjoying the beautiful afternoon. And when I went to the road, I I witnessed a situation where there was a car accident where someone died, and it was, you know, I rode past it, and about 15 or 20 minutes later, I realized I'm in shock because it really hit me so hard of what I saw. And I thought to myself, well, if I only had a remedy with me, and then it clicked, I do have Arnica 10M with me because I always keep it in my bike bag, and I took it straight away. I was able to ride back home, and that was quite a long ride. And I thought to myself, that was Ellen's teaching, arnica for shock. So it's interesting that you bring that example. As for people being stuck in shock, which they can be for years and years sometimes.
Absolutely. And, when we're looking at timelines with patients, my own patients, but at the student clinic, the trauma can start within the first 7 years of a person's life.
Mm.
And as we say at CPH, the lesson is repeated until the lesson is learned. The trauma is repeated until the trauma is removed. And that's why I said earlier that it's not like cures like. It's
Mm.
like trauma cures like trauma. So if you have a trauma of abuse, then the best remedy for that trauma would be something like staphysagria, opium, carcinosin, etc., etc.
Right.
So if people are making provings of remedies, the most important part of that proving is the causation of why those symptoms come out in the proving. That's why at CPH we use Murphy's Materia Medica, because in Murphy's Materia Medica, it gives you the causation. To me, the causation is more important than the similum of
Yeah,
symptoms.
yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that.
Match the cause.
So, you know, even yesterday, someone asked me the question in one of the emails or messages, are, are you a classical homeopath? That's what they asked me. And I responded what I've learned from you. And I said, no, I'm not, because I believe it's the classical method. It's one of the methods of applying homeopathy, which I sometimes do, but not always. So I don't really accept I don't really accept the term of classical homeopath as such. You know, that there's a classical homeopathy and there's the rest of the homeopathy. What's your approach to that as a practitioner and as a teacher, from your experience?
My experience is that the only person to guide you in your remedy application is the patient.
Mm,
If you go to a country like Ghana, where you've got healthy people with constitutional integrity, you can see the patient, and just by that, they need one remedy. And that would be classical homeopathy, because the one remedy would bring that body back into balance. But that's not what's happening in the UK, and it's not happening in the United States. And I don't think it's happening in Europe. So to define yourself as I'm a classical homeopathy, the word classical denotes this prestige that this is homeopathy, when actually that's an illusion. It's one way of applying homeopathy. So I would retranslate that into I'm a one method prescriber. So that would be a bit like being a builder with only one tool in your toolbox called a hammer. So whatever you see, you're going to hammer it down. You don't have anything else. That limits your thinking. It puts you in a box. Why? When you learn a single methodology and you're not getting results, you become a junkie going to seminars. I call it seminar junkies. You're off to hundreds and hundreds and one seminars to try to understand what's going on, when you should be learning this at the get-go, so that you're not. I remember graduating and feeling like the blind leading the blind, although I was taught practical homeopathy. At the end of the day, we were doing totality mentality. Most people who tell me they're classical homeopaths are doing totality mentality. They're trying to match the patient to a remedy picture. And to me, that's upside down thinking. You should be matching the remedy by understanding the symptoms, how the patient got those symptoms. And that's why I say to you, a student, to the students, it's a people's business, homeopathy. It's not a remedy business, it's a human business. Learn to be with humans being. Learn to understand their sacred journey of pain and suppression. Once you understand that, it's because you've analyzed their case and you've allowed the patient to be, for the first time in their life, they may have, be talking to you about their life. And what you're doing is the detective work, is to see the patterns and find solutions or methods that are going to support you to guide your patient back to health. To me, a homeopath is a guide. You don't fix people with remedies. They fix themselves when you give those remedies in the right context for that patient. If you don't, that's when you get fearful of homeopathy, because you get aggravations. And I find it very interesting that most homeopaths are afraid of their tool. They're afraid of their tool, the remedies, because they've not learned how to use those remedies in the right way.
I was actually
Why would you?
I
I
was
was going to
actually
say,
going to
why?
jump to that next question because I knew it's an interesting one, and we will get to that in a second. But I often say to my patients, or write about it, that I'm like a road sign. I can only show the information, and it's your job whether you or your decision whether you want to take that turn or not. I can't be anything else. I can't do anything else. I can't take responsibility for you eating different food or behaving in a different way that will be healthier for you. I remember when I was a student, and you said to us that what you're teaching us, or what other tutors at CPH are teaching us, they're like sticks. And you said, well, you can take those sticks and build yourself a structure around which you will build your practice and your way of thinking, or you can build a cage where you will lock yourself in. And I really liked it because my impression is that quite often people get stuck and they get locked in their cage of do's and don'ts in homeopathy, and it's full of fearful beliefs that are being passed on from one generation to another by, the big names in homeopathy. I will not mention any names today, but the big names that nobody argues with because they're world famous, right? Um, why do you think there are so many fearful myths around homeopathy? So the few that I can list would be the fear of reactions and aggravations. I personally know people that do not practice homeopathy because they're afraid of causing aggravations and that they will not know what to do with them. The next one is the fear of prescribing the wrong remedy. Someone recently told me, oh, because the way I was taught was that you can permanently injure the person by giving the wrong remedy, or you can even kill them. That's one of those things. So I would be if someone told me that when I was a student, I would never practice because I would be too afraid of it. Then there's another one. There was a fear of giving the wrong potency. If you give it too high or too low or too often, or that you will harm the person, which is very strange for me, or you give the wrong remedy, because I think that's not really working for homeopathy. It's certainly not working for homeopaths, and it's not working for people because they are so afraid of those little, sugar pills. I've got my nut mure in a sachet here just to show, which is just sucrose, that they would rather go to the pharmacy and take something which is actually chemical and damaging and possibly very toxic to them, but at least they know what they're taking because there's no magic stigma attached to it. So, going back to the myths, I really wanted to hear your opinion about that.
Okay, they are myths, and none of them are true. Because if homeopathy was dangerous, I'd have killed hundreds and thousands of people.
That's what I say. I've broke all those rules over the
I've
last 11
broken all
years
those
of
rules.
practice. I broke all of them, and as far as I'm concerned, they're all alive.
They're all alive. So let's have a look at this. If you wanted to control a system of medicine that was so amazing and so great, you would infiltrate it. And with that infiltration, you would control it with fear. So whenever you see fear, fear is a control system, and
Mm,
it's designed to stop a system of medicine from evolving.
mm,
That's all it is. It's designed to stop a system of medicine from evolving. If you want to destroy something, destroy it from within
right.
to control it. And that's what the controllers do. So homeopathy is infiltrated by big pharma to make sure it doesn't work, because you said something there. that you were more afraid of a sugar pill, which they've told you scientifically has got nothing in it, and go to the pharmacy to get your paracetamol for your headache.
Right.
Okay.
Because
So
long
what you've
term,
done, you've gone from a sugar pill back to chemical because you know chemicals, you see. So who do you think is infiltrating homeopathy?
that's true. So why
Yeah.
are the students being, because I know that firsthand because I had a few conversations like that with people. Um, Actually, I had a conversation with someone who studied at two colleges and never practiced because she said, I'm too afraid to practice. I'm too afraid of practice because I don't think I will be able to handle the aggravation. I'm afraid that I will give the wrong remedy. So who actually
Well,
teaches that?
the people who've experienced it themselves. You see, if you don't know how to analyze a case, if you've no idea where the symptoms come from, you're not communicating with the body in the right place. When the body gives you feedback, you don't know what to do with it because you've never been taught what to do with it.
Mm,
All the aggravation is feedback that you're asking the body to do something it doesn't have the resources to do. So this is why we teach not only homeopathy as our central system of healing, but we have the peripheral supports like nutrition, herbs, flower essences,
mm,
because the foundation to health is nutrition and having good bioflora in the gut. Because when you're asking the patient to heal depression, for instance, and you have no idea where that depression's come from, and the patient's been on antidepressants,
mm,
and you think, well, I'm going to give them Aurum because the picture they're showing is Aurum,
yeah.
and you give the Aurum and there's a massive aggravation, all the body's telling you is, I've got a layer of antidepressants, my gut flora is messed, and I can't actually deal with the depression and heal it because I've got a layer of toxicity above me and I'm malnourished, because every drug you take is going to mug you from essential minerals and nutrients. And if you've
Yeah.
not done your research and understand that, the body's going to show it all to you. If
That's
you
the book
don't have the tools,
I
drug
remember
muggers.
from the college from your recommendation, which is Drug Muggers, the book I use to this day, is what chemicals strip you of nutrients and which nutrients in the body. And that actually shows because people take so much stuff and they don't connect those things that if you take synthetic hormones, you will be depleted in pretty much everything
Yeah.
and
And
end
you're
up
going to be
depressed.
depressed. Yeah. So, this your depression may be coming from hormonal toxicity. So you're better off using remedies like sepia and pulsatilla as opposed to aurum. So they might be presenting an aurum picture, but the cause of that depression may be coming out of taking the synthetic hormones. This is why you've got to be a good detective and find out where those symptoms are coming from, and what's the underlying obstacles to cure, which could be simply malnutrition, when every single drug, every chemical you take destroys your bioflora.
Which is essential because we've got more foreign cells or foreign DNA in our bodies than our own, so they say.
Exactly. And if you're not grasping that as a practitioner and they're not teaching you at college, you're never going to practice. It'll be a hit and miss. A lot of the students who join us from other colleges, it's a hit and miss
Mm.
process.
Because it's actually trying to, the way I see it is a little bit more like dealing with the symptom rather than dealing with the cause, which is like a little plaster or a patch or a crutch that you can lean on, rather than seeing what's underneath.
Yeah. And that's why as I say, the truth is enduring.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't change. The principles don't change.
Yeah.
And when you apply the right principles of healing to your patients and you guide them towards health, it gets results. What doesn't get results is a hit and miss of random remedies thrown at people in the forlorn hope they're going to be able to use that to get better. And so the symptoms are the distractions. It's the same for doctors. They focus on the symptoms. They've got no idea what's going on for the patient. They don't even ask. They don't even ask about their diet, their sleep. They don't even ask what's happened to them. No idea. Here's a drug, a pill for every ill. And I could say that for homeopathy, a remedy for every ill. If you are not the detective grounded in guiding your patient back to health, you see, once you start taking a patient out of trauma, supporting the basic organ supports, the very basics of nutrition, guiding them with that, you're not going to get the results you want, but you will get the results with your patients when you walk them through their life plan. It unfolds. You're supporting them. Excuse me. You're supporting them with the right organ remedies. They're taking the nutrition. Then you begin to walk them from part patient to whole patients. So they're a whole person. And once you get there, you begin to see who they really are. Their personality begins to shine. Often they've forgotten who they are. So I remember Robert, who taught me, saying that his teacher, Thomas Morn, said the quickest way to spiritual growth and enlightenment is through homeopathy. And I have to say that I agree. And this is the thing that people are afraid of in terms of healing. When you come back into balance, you come back into the connection with the divine. Because we are actually energy beings, consciousness in a biosuit. And
Mm.
we have not learned to look after this biosuit. And when we look after our biosuit, it's in resonance and balance with who we truly are. It has its divine expression. It's a beautiful organism with its own intelligence. Once you see that it is a reflection of the person's mind and thoughts, it's honestly an amazing system. I love homeopathy because I love people.
It's actually, that's what I was going to add is I believe that our role is also to help people in a way expand their consciousness, because the minute they become more aware and conscious of various things, only then they can start to change and shift. Because if you're not aware of something, how can you change it? How can you choose differently? So my very recent thing is, and that's based on my own experience with my own biosuit called the body. But sometimes, as strange as it sounds, I learned to love my symptoms. Um, I'll give you an example. I had for years and years, and I blamed playing tennis and riding bicycle and stuff like that, a on and off tension in my right hip. And I was trying to fight that symptom, with osteopathy, with homeopathic remedies, with supplements, with all sorts of massage, all sorts of things, until it clicked with me that it's got nothing to do, that it's nothing to be fought with. And it's actually something that tells me where I am emotionally. Because it doesn't matter how many miles I do on my bike or how many hours will I play tennis and stuff like this. It's how I feel emotionally that reflects in the tension of my hip. So I learned to love that symptom and observe it. And whenever it comes on, instead of getting annoyed and trying to get rid of it, I sit down and listen and wonder, okay, what are you telling me? Where have I gone wrong? Have I taken on too much? Have I been worrying too much? Have I been trying to do too much? Where did I cross my own lines and boundaries? When did I not listen to myself? And it's perfect because the minute I changed my attitude after 10 years of having that symptom and not being able to remove it permanently, it's disappearing because I'm living a lot more attuned to myself. And that is my guidance. My hip is my guide. Whenever it hurts, that means I'm doing something wrong. So it took me 10 years to listen to that. And I think sometimes people come to me with various pains and aches, and I ask them, when do you get tension in your shoulders? Oh, because I'm overworked and this and that, and I take too much on myself. I said, there you go. So you don't need the remedy to actually make that symptom disappear, so you don't have to change anything in your life. Learn to set boundaries and not take that much on yourself. Learn to say no, and your shoulders will be just fine. So I
But
believe our job is sometimes to help people expand consciousness rather than just throwing remedies at them as well.
well, the interesting thing about that, Casper, is I found that sometimes they need the remedies to rebalance their thinking.
Mm,
And just recently, I tore a slight tear in my calf muscle, and I was in so much pain. And I was taking Ruta and Roostox, and especially Roostox because it was better for movement, strangely enough. But it
mhm.
was really painful. Then I started thinking, "Oh my God, I've got a blood clot in my leg, and I'm just about to die, etc., etc." So I spoke to my colleague Som, and he asked me, "What's been going on for you?" And I told him about an incident which I was really angry. And he said, "Oh, you snapped in anger." I said, "Yeah, you could put it that way." He said, "Why?" And it was an injustice. He said, "Why don't you take some causticum? Just add some causticum to your combination." So people are freaking out because I use combination remedies. Yes, I do. And so I did. And that night I went to bed and I woke up in the morning and it was 90% better just by taking the causticum. And what happened in me? I shifted in my thinking around the situation. So instead of being a victim of the situation and feeling the injustice, I began to look at what was I learning from the situation. Once I made that mental shift, it's like something, my body didn't have to do that for me. This is the amazing thing about this all.
It's unbelievable how the conflicts and stuff that cannot be resolved on mental, emotional, be it conscious or unconscious level, actually shows up in the body. So the body is like the screen, but the film is being projected from our mind onto it much of the time.
Yeah.
Then we obscure the image with the things that we try to do to block the symptoms.
Well, I find, we say to our students in their first module, watch Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. It's a
Yeah,
long talk, but it's worth watching it because he explains homeopathy better than any homeopath, which is cellular signaling.
yeah.
It's where are the cells getting the signals from, and they're getting it from the mind and creating the reality in the physical body. So the other thing that people muddled up is that we are quantum beings in an energetic plane. It looks physical, but it's energetic, and that's where your remedies work. So you can't use the same Newtonian paradigm for homeopathy. That
Mm,
it's an energy-based system of medicine, and it works differently to allopathy. Therefore, you can't kill with the remedies. You can do no harm. It's very gentle. If it's not the right remedy in the right place for you, it's not going to work. And so a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I'm afraid that the remedies aren't, homeopathy is not going to work." Well, it won't work if you don't know the cause of the problem. It really won't.
mm,
You see, when I started using homeopathy, I had no idea that it didn't work because I got myself an acute therapeutic book. And what I would do is sit there with my kids when they were ill, and I'd say, like, I'm going to read, you've got this, this fever, and I'm going to read you the fever remedies. You tell me which one feels right for you. So I'd go A, ask, belladonna, and I'd read the remedy B, and my kids would just go, it's the second one, mummy. And I'd go, okay, then I'd give them the remedy, they'd get better. So only when I went to college that I realized that there was this whole thing that the remedies didn't work. And then I wanted to know why those remedies didn't work. And when I met Robin, when I met her, and I saw that it had the causations, it was like I was home. I now understood that every remedy needs to match the causation.
So, what do you think? I don't think we ever spoke about it. I ever talked to you about it, but it's just something, you know, as the years go by, I often, we have different experiences, we evolve, we learn, we come to different conclusions. But I remember Pete Joyce, who was one of the tutors at the college at that time, used to say that it's the remedy, but it's the intention with which you use that remedy and the energy that you give to people. I remember I went to Peter for a few consultations as a patient, and I said to him, all my patients are getting worse and aggravated. And he asked me, that was my very beginnings as a homeopath, and he asked me, how do you feel? And I said, I'm annoyed because I'm tired and overworked. And he said, yes, exactly. That's what you're giving them. Don't be surprised that they're aggravating. If you're tired and annoyed and overworked, have a few days off and see what happens, because you are giving your stuff onto them. So it doesn't matter what you give them, it's the intention. That's why I sometimes ask people not to give remedy. If I speak to a parent who's extremely anxious, I tell them, get your husband or your wife to give the remedies to your child. Otherwise, you will be giving your anxiety and your fear. How do you see that? Because it's an information tool and it's all energy.
Absolutely. It is all energy, and intention plays a big part because we're all interconnected, and people feel where you're at. So if you're prescribing in fear and afraid of aggravations, then that's exactly what you're going to get, because you see that fear or anxiety, etc., will cloud how you analyze your case in terms of getting the right remedies for your patient. That clouds you.
Mm,
So you're not clear about what it is that you're doing. And then when you give the remedy, that's, that's attached to the remedy to give you the result that you are actually looking for. The universe gives you everything you ask for. And that's why I say to people, do this with love. When
mm,
you love your patients, it's so much easier. The remedies work all the time because you have the clarity of what the causation is. You get that. You see, when you come from a place of love, the library of the universe is open to you. When you come from a place of fear, anxiety, tiredness, etc., that information is locked away from you. The door is closed. So when you come from that place of understanding, feel and you're fearless and you love what you're doing, and you see that your mission as a practitioner is guidance, not fixing, but guidance. That love gives you the clarity. So when you are looking at your case and you're analyzing the case, all the truth of the needs of that patient come clearly to you. So when you give that remedy to the patient, the fact that you know, had clarity and you love what you're doing, that gets handed to the patient and you will get the results you want, which is that they get better.
Mm.
Yeah. So when I always give remedies to the patient, I assume they're going to get better, and they do. Because what I've done is I've actually guided them towards their health. I've opened the door to deeper understanding of what's going on so that my clarity of choosing a treatment strategy is clear.
And you don't put
My
you.
intention is love. Yeah. I don't put that onto my remedies. So, to be a guide to help people to heal themselves. And I feel the same about the students. I am honored to humbly guide students into a deeper understanding of health,
Mm.
health, healing, and homeopathy.
I remember it's one of the tutors. I'm not going to go into names, but it was very interesting. I'm sure when I say it, you will know which tutor that was. He said to once, my patients do not aggravate because I don't give them permission to aggravate. I give them permission to have the rapid healing reaction. And it stuck with me very much. And I was talking about it to someone recently, and I thought that's a very good energetic place of the prescriber to give the remedy. It will make you better.
And
Okay.
I think that comes from the place of when you understand what it is you're doing, what the symptoms are about, you don't have that fear.
Mm,
You really don't. Once you know what it is you're doing on behalf of your patient and guiding them, you just don't have that fear. I don't give my patients permission to not get well. I give them the permission to get well
mm,
because I am not coming from that place of you know, misunderstanding and lack of clarity. So this is what Peter means about your intention.
yeah.
The intention is because you're clear, you understand, and you're fearless, the door for deeper growth and support for your patient is open. And therefore, you're standing in your healing power to guide them.
Mm,
But if you are taught, oh, the remedies do this, oh, if you do that potency, you could kill the patient. If you do the, how on earth are you going to have clarity? You'll be muddled, you'll be fuddled, and you'll be terrified of a sugar pill, which they keep telling you has got nothing in it and can do nothing. It's just placebo. Why are you afraid of a placebo? Which is you'd rather take something that's chemical that changes all your body's chemical processes. That one of the things that baffles me is why? Why are you afraid of your tools? You're only afraid because you don't know how to use those tools. And that's why you rush off and you're a seminar junkie trying to find different remedies to fix different symptoms.
And
I know because I've been there myself.
what's scary to me is that, people can go to seminars and schools and stuff like that, which are signed by huge, big, world famous names. And it's actually those huge names that quite often pass on that fear to their students. But because they're so famous, you can't question them. So never mix the remedies, never repeat the remedy too often, never, all the don'ts. It's
Or
never do
none
it,
of this
all
is
the
none of
don'ts.
it's true. It's never, none of it's
That's
true.
very interesting.
And I just think, and I say this to people, look, if you're hearing something that makes you fearful, walk away because it's not the truth.
Mm. It's
The
interesting.
truth is not fearful.
one last thing is, there's that sort of thinking that you must never mix remedies and use combinations. I use combinations now and then. Sometimes I use single remedies, sometimes combinations, as do you, I'm sure. But I remember one of the teachers once said at the CPH was, and that's very interesting, and that's going back to intention. You can mix anything you want into your combination as long as you know why you do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You need to know exactly why, what you're expecting from each of those remedies in that combination. You
Yeah.
need to understand that because you're asking the body to take from that combination what it needs to find balance. So you have, I found it bizarre that people would say to me, because you don't know what's working. And it's like, well, why am I going to get the patient to tell me what's working? I should know what I expect to work before I give it to the patient.
It's almost like, when people say those things, it's to me, it sounds like they're putting the method above the person that they're trying to treat. It doesn't matter if it works or not, but I'm using it according to the art of this and that method, be it, you know, whichever one it is.
Yeah,
So I think the energy is in a very wrong place because it's just to prove that what I'm doing is right, rather than I'm trying to help you because you came to me for help. So it's a
Ca-
very, very interesting thing. So
Casper, what I was going to say is, again, I'm going to re-emphasize the true healer is the patient. It's not the remedy, it's the patient. The art of being a good practitioner is where, how, and where you prescribe. And the methods guide you in that, in that way. They just guide you to know what you're doing and where you're prescribing. The true healer is actually the patient, and the joy that I have as a practitioner is the guidance for that patient, giving them the permission to get better.
instead of giving them your fear of them getting worse, that's a very
Yeah,
different energy and different place of prescribing, isn't it?
yeah, it's very
That's why
different.
we have to look after our own well-being and energy before we can try even to begin to help other people. Because if we don't feel good and we feel afraid, we will never be able to help other people with that.
Absolutely.
We're just going to reinforce their own fear in them.
Yeah. So this is why we encourage all our students, even if they've been seeing a homeopath, we always got to say to them, look, see a practically trained homeopath and watch this space. And we do see big changes in them and their attitudes, because you have to, if you're learning anything, you've got to go through the process of experiencing it. You've got to experience health.
Mm. I remember you saying about the mainstream, health system. You said it should never be called health system. It should be called sickness system because they never talk about health. All they talk about is diseases. So the focus is very different. The focus is on the problem rather than on the solution, the way I understood your words.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have what's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, as we go towards the end of our interview today? What do you consider to be the biggest hope and the biggest threat for the future of homeopathy, generally worldwide?
Well, for me, the biggest hope is that we are shifting in our understanding of health. A lot of research, I mean, just when I look at Bruce Lipton and the work that he's done, a lot of research is showing that we're energy beings and that homeopathy works. So when you look at all the work that's done on water and the changes in our thoughts and belief systems and the impact that it does have on water. I've forgotten the name of the Japanese doctor who did a lot of research, and that's been continued on that. And the hope is that most people are getting to a crisis in terms of what they're eating and the drugs that they're taking and seeing that they just don't feel good. So I feel that there's an incredible hope for homeopathy coming into its own as a system of medicine. The threats for homeopathy is that homeopaths don't wake up and understand that it's a people's business and it's not about the remedies, it's about people and how to use the remedies like a true healer in the right place at the right time for their patients. So they're not afraid of their tools. And that's what I see as the biggest obstacle for homeopathy is that there's a lot of fear and control. But then, as I said earlier, who creates fear and control? It's an infiltration from within without people realizing it.
It makes sense to me, very much so. Ellen,
Maybe I've just brainwashed you.
but that happened long time ago, I believe, already. So, Ellen, thank you so much for your words of wisdom and for the time you gave me, and that, you agreed to join this interview, something I've done for the very first time and hopefully not the last. I was talking to one other Polish graduate who was your student very recently. She couldn't join us today because she is traveling, but I said to her, who knows, maybe one day we can do it again in a broader, there could be three of us or maybe more, and we can have that chat. And I believe it's something that probably people need. Maybe some people will not agree with what we talked about today, but anyone can take whatever they want from this interview and leave the rest, whatever they prefer. Nobody's forced to do anything, but I believe that the Polish speaking homeopathic community need to meet Ellen Kramer, and that was my intention of doing this interview, because I do believe we need people like you in this little world.
Casper, it's my absolute pleasure, and I will re-emphasize this again. If what I say resonates with you, I'm really happy. If it doesn't, just dump it and keep doing what works for you.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
All my
And
pleasure.
I'm going to switch off the recording now, and I hope to speak to you soon.